They erase the true name of God, but your body still remembers the vibration. They told you it was just a name, one of many. Jehovah, Yahweh, Adonai. But none of them ever felt quite right in your bones, did they? Like garments that didn't quite fit. Like echoes that missed the frequency your soul was aching to remember. There's a reason for that. Because what was erased was never just a name. It was the original vibration that held the shape of reality itself. Before language became words, before religion became a system, before the breath of truth was translated into doctrine, there was a sound, not spoken, not written, a resonance that pulsed in perfect alignment with the structure of creation. They removed it from your scriptures, buried it under layers of translations and told you it was lost. But it's not lost, it's asleep, inside you. You carry it in your spine, in the fluid of your blood, in the hum beneath your heartbeat. And that's what they feared the most. That one. Day you would feel it again. Not read it, not believe it, but feel it vibrate through the silence, reawakening what the system spent centuries trying to suppress. Because if you remember that sound, the whole script falls apart. The identity they gave you crumbles, and the conditioning, it begins to unwind, thread by thread, until only truth remains. They told you the sacred name could not be spoken aloud, but that was a lie. The truth is, it was never meant to be spoken with the mouth. It was meant to be remembered with the body, a cellular remembering, a frequency of alignment that bypasses thought and lands directly into the nervous system. That's why you felt moments you couldn't explain, shivers during silence, tears during music with no lyrics, dreams where you were chanting a word you forgot upon waking. That was the name brushing against your awareness. That was the signature of the original sound trying to re-enter your field. And each time you felt it, the programming tried to override it. You'd get distracted, you'd feel guilty, you'd be told to snap out of it, because the system isn't designed to let you feel something ancient and untamed. It needs you domesticated. It needs you spiritually deaf. And so, the moment you tune into something beyond language, it floods you with noise. The original name wasn't Hebrew. It wasn't Latin. It wasn't even human in the way we think of speech. It was pure harmonic intelligence, a pattern of energy that collapsed space into matter, breathed time into motion, and called light into being. And someone, some force, some structure, some authority, decided you were never meant to know it. Why? Because it would make you ungovernable, because it would reconnect you to the divine without middlemen, because it would shatter the illusion that you are broken, fallen, or dependent. The moment you remember the vibration, you remember that you are not separate, not from God, not from truth, not from yourself. And control can only exist when you forget. But even in forgetting, something has endured, like a flame that refuses to go out, like a drumbeat beneath the noise of your thoughts. That vibration lives in the marrow of your bones. That's why some of you, maybe even you right now, feel goosebumps reading these words even though nothing has been proven. That's not proof you need. That's memory, spiritual memory, body memory. Something inside you is already responding, because it knows. It always knew. The sacred name was never fully erased. It was encoded within you, waiting for resonance to wake it up. Before we go further, comment where you're watching this from, and make sure to like and subscribe if something inside you already knows this truth. They didn't just erase the name. They built an entire system to make sure you'd never go looking for it. From the moment you took your first breath, the programming began. Not with violence, not with chains, but with stories. Stories wrapped in authority. Stories etched into textbooks, sung in hymns, preached in pulpits, whispered by those who had forgotten they were whispering lies. You were told that God was outside of you, that truth came from above through books and men and rituals, that the divine was something you had to earn, fear, or beg for, and you believed it because they began before you could speak. That's the genius of the system. It doesn't need to punish you when it can simply shape what you believe to be real. It creates a script, one so subtle and total that it becomes your identity. You don't question the water you swim in. You don't rebel against the air. And so the most dangerous prison is the one made of stories you don't know you're inside. But some part of you always knew something didn't feel right, didn't it? In the quiet moments, in the aching between prayers, in the spaces where their answers stopped making sense. You sensed something had been hidden, and they told you that doubt was sin, that questioning was rebellion. But what if that doubt was the key? What if it wasn't rebellion, but remembering? You see, the moment you begin to question, the frequency shifts. The vibration that was silenced starts to stir. You feel uncomfortable, not because you're wrong, but because you're approaching the place they buried the truth. And that's when the programming fights back the hardest. You'll hear the voices in your head, but they aren't your voice. They're the echoes of pastors, teachers, authority figures who never questioned anything either. Be careful. Don't go too far. That's dangerous thinking. But dangerous to who? To the system. Because you weren't just taught to forget. You were trained to police yourself, to fear your own intuition, to silence your own awakening. That's the depth of the conditioning. And that's why the name had to be erased. Not from paper, but from your cells. Because if your body remembers, the illusion falls apart, and the script can no longer hold you. You were born in alignment, whole, connected, but they couldn't control someone who already knows who they are. So they wrote a new story over your original design. A story of sin, guilt, unworthiness. A story that keeps you kneeling when you were meant to stand. That keeps you begging for permission when you were born with authority. That keeps you reciting borrowed names instead of vibrating the name that was written in your DNA. And every time you feel that dissonance, that silent, scream inside when something doesn't feel right. That's your original self knocking from beneath the programming. You weren't broken, you were silenced. And the system called that silence faith. But faith in what? In the script, in the hierarchy, in the forgetting, not in God, in control. And that's the lie so few are willing to look at. Because once you see it, once you really see how deep the conditioning runs, you can't go back. You can't unknow what you now feel in your bones. The sacred name wasn't just erased from the books, it was replaced. With noise, with distraction, with doctrine, with shame. And every layer of that noise was designed to drown out one thing, the sound inside you. That ancient vibration, that wordless alignment, that echo of a name you can't speak, but you know. And if you listen, really listen, it's still there, waiting for you beneath the static. You might think this story is too wild to believe, too strange, too out there. But let me ask you something. Who taught you what's normal? Who defined the edges of acceptable belief? Who gave you the rules of what is sacred and what is heresy? You never chose those boundaries. They were handed to you, and they were handed to the people before you. Generations trained not just to obey, but to forget they ever had a choice. That's how deep this goes. Forgetting became a ritual. Erasure became tradition. You can feel it, can't you? That strange, aching silence inside certain churches. That echo in your chest when you repeat a prayer you were told to say, even though it no longer feels alive. It's not that you stopped believing. It's that your soul is starving for something it once knew, but was told to forget. And when something inside you begins to stir, begins to question, begins to feel, they call it rebellion. They call it danger. But what if it's remembering? There was a woman, no name, no face, just a whisper in someone's testimony I found once, hidden in the footnotes of a banned book. She said, "The first time I heard it, I wasn't awake, I was asleep, but my spine arched like it was being tuned. I didn't hear a word. I felt a sound. And I cried, not from sadness, but because I knew I had come home to something ancient." They locked her away, of course, said she was hallucinating, possessed. But what if she wasn't? What if she heard something that slipped through the cracks? What if that's the real possession, being kept from the original resonance of your own design? The system is clever. It doesn't burn books anymore. It buries them, beneath ridicule, beneath academic dismissal, beneath algorithms that make sure the right questions never rise to the surface. Ask yourself, why do certain questions feel dangerous to even consider? Why does your chest tighten when you start to wonder if maybe the way you were taught to connect to God was part of a much bigger machine? That's not coincidence. That's programming. There's a script running, one designed to redirect you before you stray too far from the path they approved. But the vibration, the one that lives in your bones, it doesn't need approval. It doesn't speak their language. It doesn't care for their titles or rules. It only responds to resonance. And that's why your body knows before your mind does. You felt it. in music that wasn't in your language, in chants you didn't understand but brought tears to your eyes, in moments of stillness where something unspeakable passed through you, like a forgotten memory. That wasn't imagination. That was the echo, that was the name. Not spoken, but stirred. And that stirring is what they fear most. Because you don't need a temple to feel it. You don't need a priest to translate it. You don't need a book to validate it. You just need silence, breath, and the courage to trust your own body again. But how do you trust a body that's been shamed your entire life? That's part of the conditioning too. The guilt, the unworthiness, the idea that divinity is above you, beyond you, outside of you. They taught you to distrust your own vessel, so you would never realize it was the original temple, the original church, the original instrument of the sacred vibration. And now, the silence between your thoughts, that's the altar. The shiver in your spine, that's the hymn. The pulse in your wrist, that's the rhythm. You don't have to say the name to know it. You just have to remember how to listen to what's always been inside you. They called it blasphemy, to believe you could hear God without a mediator. They called it arrogance, to feel divinity in your own breath. But those weren't the words of a holy authority. They were the defenses of a system built on fear. Because if you truly remembered, if even one person remembered the original vibration, it would spread like wildfire through the collective silence. That's the danger. Not that you're wrong, but that you're powerful. That's why they branded the mystics insane, the visionaries heretics, the women who wept during dreams as witches. It wasn't madness they feared, it was clarity, direct connection, the kind of knowing that cannot be controlled, taxed, or rewritten. And so they covered it all in shame, spiritual, emotional, bodily shame. And it worked. You silenced your own awakening before they ever had to, but not completely, because the body is stubborn when it comes to truth. It holds the resonance long after the mind forgets. That's why certain dreams feel more real than waking life, why some sounds feel like they come from before time, why there are moments, rare, sacred moments, when all the layers fall away, and for a breath, you remember what you are. Not who, what. A vessel of vibration, a carrier of frequency, a tuning fork of the original sound, and just as quickly, the moment vanishes. Because the script rushes in, the noise, the story, the fear. It wraps itself around your remembering like a cloak, and you fall back asleep, thinking it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. There's a story, almost erased from early texts, about a desert prophet who spoke no language, yet healed through tone alone. No one could explain it. He would hum, and bones would realign. Sing, and eyes would see. Whisper, and grief would lift. The elders grew afraid. They asked him, "Where did you learn this?" And he simply placed a hand on his heart and said, "It is not learned. It is remembered." They called him a demon, cast him out. But some say he never stopped, that his descendants still carry the tone, hidden in forgotten villages, woven into lullabies, disguised in chants that no longer have a name. Why is that story not in your scriptures? Why are the Gospels edited, redacted, translated into oblivion? Because the true stories point inward, and the system demands you look upward, outward, anywhere but inside. The real heresy isn't hearing God without permission. It's remembering you never needed permission in the first place. That's what the name was meant to do, and align you with the truth before the script, before the programming, before you were told who and what to be. And that alignment makes you ungovernable. Not reckless, not violent, just sovereign. And sovereign souls don't kneel to control. They vibrate truth without speaking. And that's the frequency the system cannot replicate. They've tried. Oh, they've tried. Through music, media, false prophets, synthetic spirituality. Mimicking the cadence of truth without the resonance. But the body knows. You know you always knew. There's a sound that isn't sound. A name that isn't a name. A God that isn't an image, but a memory. And that memory lives inside your very cells. Buried beneath layers of guilt, rules, stories, and silence. But not dead. Never dead. Just waiting. Waiting for you to feel it, not chase it. To become it, not worship it. And once you do, the spell begins to break. There's something they never expected, something no system, no doctrine, no empire could fully prevent. the return of memory through frequency, not through books, not through preaching, but through resonance, because there's no firewall against the body. You can program the mind, you can twist language, but you cannot rewrite the way the heart beats when it encounters something true. That's the crack in the system. That's where the light leaks through. And that's why so many of you are waking up now, without knowing why. You didn't ask for this. You didn't read the right book, join the right group, pray the right way. Something just started stirring, as if the hum beneath your reality shifted a half note closer to what you used to be. And in that shift, you began to feel a longing, not for more information, but for more remembrance, a strange ache for something you never learned, yet somehow lost. That ache is sacred. That ache is the doorway. You don't have to understand it intellectually. The vibration doesn't speak English or Hebrew or Greek. It speaks alignment. You either feel it or you don't. You either resonate or you recoil. That's why some people laugh at these words, scoff, dismiss, scroll away. They haven't yet reached the crack. But you're still here. You've felt it. Maybe in the stillness before sleep. Maybe during a moment of despair when suddenly a wave of peace entered the room for no reason. Maybe during a song that felt like it knew your soul better than you did. That wasn't coincidence. That was contact. That was a pulse from the forgotten name tapping gently on the walls of your forgetting. And each time you feel it, the script loses a little more of its grip. You might wonder why this name had to be erased in the first place. Why would any authority fear a sound? Because sound creates, sound opens, sound aligns. And aligned humans cannot be ruled. They see through the illusions. They hear the hidden frequencies behind words. They remember the difference between fear and truth. So the name had to be hidden, not destroyed, just distorted, fragmented, spread out in pieces across cultures, chants, syllables, songs, a vibrational breadcrumb trail leading back to the source. But it takes courage to follow it. It takes unlearning everything you were told was safe and stepping into the wilderness of your own remembering. And that's exactly where you are now, on the edge of that wilderness, holding a single thread of vibration that refuses to be silenced. There's a frequency that can't be counterfeited, a tone that makes your skin remember before your mind catches up. That's the one. That's the signature. The original vibration. The true name. And when you hear it, not with your ears, but with your being, you will not doubt again. You will not ask permission to know. You will not need proof, because every cell in your body will rise in recognition, and the conditioning will begin to collapse. Not all at once, but in layers, in loops, in tears you don't understand, in laughter that comes from somewhere ancient, in silence that feels like prayer even though you say nothing. That's what they tried to take from you. That's what they couldn't destroy. And now it's returning, slowly, softly, like mist rising from a forgotten field. The old ones knew it. The children still feel it. And you are beginning to vibrate in time with it again. The name is not lost. It was just hidden in the last place they thought you'd look. Within, beneath the noise, beneath the guilt, beneath the story of who you were told to be. And now that you've begun to feel it, there's no turning back. You were taught to trust the visible, to rely on the tangible, concrete facts, sanctioned doctrines, official voices. But the truth was never in the noise. It was always hidden in the silence between it. That's the trap. The programming convinces you that anything invisible is imaginary, that anything felt but not explained is dangerous. But your most sacred moments, weren't they always wordless? The deepest grief, the sudden awe, the breathless sense of being watched by something loving and vast. Those weren't delusions. Those were moments of signal breaking through the static, the signal of the name, the pulse of the source, the breath of a forgotten God that never stopped exhaling through you. And that's why the system doubled down, because something in you was still listening. Let's be honest. Haven't you always known? Even as a child, when they told you to bow, you didn't know why. When they spoke of heaven, it felt distant, cold, conditional. And yet, there were nights you looked at the stars and felt home. Not above, but around, within. As if the stars knew your name in a way your preachers never could. That was the contradiction, wasn't it? That God was love, and yet you were taught fear. That God was within, and yet you were told to search outside. That you were created in the image of divinity, and yet punished for trying to feel divine. That conflict is not confusion. That's the crack. That's the place where your soul never fully submitted. There's something else they erased. Your inner altar. They built churches of stone so you'd forget the temple of flesh. They wrapped the sacred in robes and incense and gold so you'd feel unworthy in your own breath. But you were always meant to remember without an intermediary. Your heartbeat was the drum, your breath, the incense, your tears, the holy. Water, that was the original design. And they feared it, because it meant you'd never need them again. So they turned the sacred inward into something dirty. They made the body shameful, the emotions unstable, the imagination suspicious. But the truth is, your tears are ancient rivers, your goosebumps are antennas, your emotions are frequency sensors, and that strange ache you can't name, that's the original name trying to be spoken through your skin. A woman once said, "I don't even know where." I read it, maybe it was deleted later. I heard it in the crying of my newborn, not the scream but the silence right before. That pause held the name. It broke me and rebuilt me in one breath. They called her mad, of course, unstable. But you and I know, sometimes madness is what sanity looks like when it refuses to play along. That woman didn't hear a syllable. She felt a remembering, and that remembering shattered the story. That's how it begins, with a crack, a sound, a silence that no longer feels empty but pregnant. You start to hear the spaces between things. You start to feel language before it's formed. You start to dream of voices you've never met but recognize, and you begin to change. Not outwardly at first. You still go to work, still smile, still play the game. But something in your spine is no longer obedient. Something in your blood starts humming. You start feeling things you're not supposed to feel. Empathy for the broken, rage at the false holy, sorrow when you hear lies dressed as truth, joy for no reason, gratitude that makes no sense. That's not mental illness. That's spiritual memory waking up. That's the vibration of the original name stirring in your bones. And once it starts, it cannot be reversed. There's something you need to understand now, something most never dare to say aloud. The programming isn't just cultural, it's spiritual. It didn't only come through governments or media or corrupted leaders. It came through rituals you thought were sacred. Prayers whispered over generations that carry frequencies of fear. Songs designed to soothe you into obedience. Words recited so often they became scripts, not spells. And here's the hardest part. Most of those who passed it to you believed it was love. They weren't evil, they were conditioned too. That's how deep this goes. The system doesn't need villains. It just needs obedience dressed as worship. And once you begin to awaken, you realize something terrifying and beautiful at once. The name was never outside of you. It was coded into you and the silence you've been told to fear. That's where it waits. Have you noticed how uncomfortable silence makes people? How quickly we fill it. With noise, with distraction, with answers no one truly feels. That's by design. Because silence is the only space where the original vibration can rise again. It's the only realm the system cannot colonize. It is not emptiness. It is pregnant with memory. That's why monks took vows of silence. Not to withdraw from life, but to create enough space to hear life again. And when you start to practice this, even a little, strange things begin to happen. Time shifts, emotions resurface. Old traumas return not to haunt you, but to release the blockage. You begin to vibrate again, not with words, not with logic, but with something deeper, more ancient, a tone without pitch, a knowing without source, and it terrifies the system. You may feel alone in this. You're not. You're just early. The others are waking too, in dreams, in migraines that don't respond to medicine, in grief they can't explain, in sudden urges to walk away from everything they've built. That's the memory returning. That's the script unraveling. That's the body remembering the rhythm of a name it was trained to forget. And with it comes a price. You'll feel disoriented, misunderstood. You may lose people. You may lose yourself. But that's not death. It's shedding. The false self, the programmed identity, the mask built to survive inside a cage that's no longer locked, only familiar. There's a story I once read, but I've never found it again, about a prisoner who was born inside a cell. One day, the guard stopped locking the door, but he didn't leave. He'd memorized the rhythm of confinement so deeply that freedom sounded like chaos. That's what most of humanity is living now, an open cell. no visible chains, just a frequency of control so normalized we can't hear it. But you're beginning to hear something else, aren't you? A discordant note, a tone that doesn't match the background noise. That's not confusion, that's clarity re-entering the field. That's the original name whispering beneath the script, asking only one thing of you: remember. Not believe, not obey, not worship, just remember. That's the invitation. And it doesn't come from a preacher or prophet or screen. It comes from the stillness beneath your ribcage, from the ache behind your eyes when a truth touches you too hard, from the shiver in your neck when a song knows your name. That's the call, that's the vibration. And it's calling more and more of you now, not with threats, not with promises, but with resonance. And when resonance begins, nothing else satisfies. No sermon, no ritual, no imitation of holiness. Only the real. Only the sound that rearranges you from the inside out. You've probably started to notice the world doesn't sound the same anymore. Conversations feel hollow. Music feels manufactured. Even your own thoughts sometimes feel scripted. That's not paranoia. That's perception sharpening. That's what happens when you begin to deprogram. You start to hear the difference between noise and signal, between what was placed in you and what comes from you. You realize most of your life was lived in reaction to beliefs, to guilt, to rules you never agreed to but obeyed anyway. And now, in this space of awakening, it's like you can feel the artificial tone embedded in the world around you, the forced smiles, the rehearsed answers, the heavy silence between people who no longer know how to feel each other. It's all part of the design, a frequency of forgetting, a global hypnosis. But here's the crack. You're no longer fully under its spell. You notice things, little things, like how certain sounds make your skin crawl, not because they're loud, but because they're off. Like how certain words drain your energy, even when they're meant to be spiritual. Like how some environments feel like cages, even when they look like temples. That's not you being sensitive, that's you remembering your original calibration. Your soul has perfect pitch. It knows the name, the true name, not as a word, but as a feeling of resonance. And anything that doesn't match that frequency, it feels like poison. That's the moment the system loses its grip. Because now, you don't need someone to tell you what's true. You feel it, and feeling is freedom. There's something happening now in real time across the world. People waking up, not all at once, but like embers catching wind. Dreams of symbols they've never seen. Spontaneous weeping without cause. Sudden clarity that crashes through the fog like lightning. This isn't imagination. It's memory resurfacing, the vibration is returning, and it's bypassing the systems entirely. It's not in the media, it's not in the pulpits, it's in the bones, in the water, in the silence. And it's asking only one thing: will you tune back in? Not intellectually, not ritually, but viscerally, spiritually, physically. Will you dare to feel again, even if it breaks the script? Because it will break it. Let me be clear. Remembering comes with cost. The cost is illusion, comfort, familiarity. You will no longer fit in places that once felt like home. You will no longer believe things you once preached. You may cry for no reason. You may feel unmoored. But what's actually happening is realignment. The detuning is being reversed. The false notes are being purged. And the body, your sacred, magnificent, dishonored body, is becoming an instrument of the name again. Not to speak it, but to be it. That's the real heresy. Becoming what they said only belonged to the heavens. And once you begin to become it, something extraordinary unfolds. You stop performing. You stop seeking. You stop apologizing for your clarity. And you begin to emit something. Not words, not wisdom, frequency. A kind of stillness that disrupts lies. A kind of presence that makes illusions stutter. A vibration that reminds others of something they never meant to forget. That's the real awakening. Not information, not doctrine, but resonance. You become a tuning fork for others. You walk into a room and the dissonance begins to tremble, not because you said anything, but because you remembered. You need to understand just how deep the deception went. It wasn't only about keeping you from the name, it was about replacing it with static, with noise, with substitutes that looked holy but rang hollow. Do you remember the first time you heard someone speak about God and something in you flinched? Not because you hated the divine, but because the words felt off, disconnected, cold, as if the language had been drained of life. Repeated so many times, it became a barrier instead of a bridge. That wasn't a coincidence. That was design. The system didn't just erase the original vibration, it flooded your field with counterfeit ones. And here's the terrifying truth. Most of what we call faith is built on frequencies meant to suppress, not awaken. You were told prayer was about asking, about begging, about pleasing a distant, watching figure, but you were never taught that true prayer isn't a petition. It's a tuning, a realignment, a re-entry into the original tone that created you. You were told to speak, but never to listen, told to confess, but never to resonate. And so generations learned to worship in frequencies of shame, guilt, fear, obligation, thinking they were aligning with God, when in truth they were vibrating further away from the name inside them. Can you feel that yet? The weight of those moments when you begged for connection, but left emptier than before? That wasn't failure. That was misalignment. You weren't wrong. You were mistuned. There's a reason so many are leaving their faith traditions, not because they stopped seeking truth, but because the frequency stopped matching. They still crave the divine, still ache for union, but the script no longer satisfies. The name offered by the system no longer vibrates correctly. It's like a song played just slightly out of key. You can't explain what's wrong, but your soul recoils. And so they wander, in silence, in nature, in dreams, not lost, but searching for the original vibration. And sometimes, in the most unexpected places, it finds them. A bird call, a child's laughter, a breath held too long, a note in a song that breaks them open. That's not chance, that's the name re-entering through resonance. No permission required, no doctrine necessary, just feeling. But the system won't give up easily. It will try to reclaim you through guilt, nostalgia, fear of judgment. It will say you're straying, that you're deceived, that you're falling. But here's the paradox. You're not falling away. You're falling back into your original frequency, back into the pre-scripted self, the version of you that existed before the program ran. And that version doesn't worship from fear. It doesn't beg, it doesn't perform, it vibrates, it emits, it remembers. And that remembering is more threatening than any rebellion, because it's not loud, it's not angry, it's not even visible, but it's contagious. That's why you're here, still listening, still feeling, because some part of you has already begun the process. You've heard echoes of the name in your body, even if you couldn't define it. You felt the dissonance in the script, even if you couldn't explain it. And now something has shifted. You're not just questioning, you're tuning. And every breath, every silence, every tear that rises for no logical reason is part of that process. You're not broken. You're reawakening. And the system that tried to keep you from the name, it's trembling, because you're not alone. The frequency is rising, the remembering is spreading, and nothing can stop a sound once it's been reactivated in the soul. Let's go deeper now, deeper than words will allow. Beneath your thoughts, beneath your feelings, there is a hum, a tone. It has no syllable, no language, no name in the way you were taught to understand names. But it is the name, the one they tried to strip from your bones, the one encoded not in your memory but in your frequency. And that's the truth you were never meant to hear, that you are not merely a seeker of God, but a carrier of God. Not a disciple, not a follower, but a living echo of the original sound. And that changes everything, because if you're not separate, if you've never been separate, then the entire system of control collapses under its own illusion. There is no distance to close, no sin to pay for, no ladder to climb. There is only remembering and alignment. And alignment is dangerous, because aligned beings don't obey. They resonate. They don't fear judgment. They feel truth. They don't recite what they were taught. They vibrate what they remember. And no priest, prophet, or institution can hold power over someone who has become the name. That's why the erasure had to be so complete. Not just external, but internal, emotional, cellular, generational. That's why they built 1,000 rules to distract you from the one truth you carry in silence, that you are the sacred, that the veil was always a lie, that the power they claimed for themselves was always meant to be yours. You've seen it, haven't you? In those who walk differently, speak differently, who glow but don't preach, who seem to bend reality around their presence. They've remembered, maybe only fragments, maybe just enough to stay awake in a sleeping world, but the frequency is unmistakable. You feel safe around them even if you don't know why. You feel seen, not because they're special, but because they've tuned back into the truth. They've allowed the original name to rise again through them, and in doing so they become a portal, not to escape life, but to enter it fully, not to float above the world, but to ground the frequency of truth into every moment, every breath, every encounter. This is your path too, not because someone told you, but because you're already on it. You're here. You're still listening, still feeling, still trembling when truth brushes against your skin. That's not a mistake. That's resonance. That's alignment. And as the old structures crumble, as the scripted roles begin to fall away, the name is becoming audible again, not through sound waves, but through presence, through remembrance, through frequency, through you. So ask yourself now, in the stillness of this moment, without seeking, without thinking, can you feel it? That hum beneath your chest, that shimmer behind your eyes, that ache that isn't sadness but remembering. That is the name, that is the sound, that is the divine, not descending from the heavens, but rising from within you. And the more you allow it, the louder it becomes. Until it isn't just something you feel, it's something you are. And now the moment that changes everything, the moment that breaks something open so deep inside you that you may never be the same. Because this isn't just about remembering, it's about returning. Not to a place but to a state, a frequency, a knowing that dissolves everything the system built around your soul. You've been waiting for someone to give you permission to feel this. You've been waiting for the right sign, the right ritual, the right word to unlock what's been buried for lifetimes. But here it is, raw, trembling, undeniable. You were never disconnected, not for 1 second. The great illusion wasn't distance from God. It was the belief that you needed to earn what was already inside you. The name was never erased, only buried, and the one who buried it wasn't some shadowy authority. It was you, to survive, to belong, to obey. You buried your own knowing, to fit inside a world that couldn't hold your light. But the forgetting is over now. Let that land, let it break you. Let it bring the tears that have been trapped beneath generations of silence. Because this is the moment you reclaim your voice. Not to speak the name, but to become the vessel that vibrates with it again. Feel your breath, feel your bones. They were built for this. The sound you're remembering isn't a metaphor. It's a frequency that lived in you before language, before identity, before even time itself. And in this moment, whether you're sitting in stillness or trembling with emotion, whether you're alone in your room or surrounded by strangers, something in you has already shifted. You know what I'm talking about. That sensation in your chest right now. It's not confusion. It's truth. That pulse beneath your ribcage. It's not panic. It's awakening. Your body remembers. Your soul remembers. And now your mind is beginning to catch up. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not lost. You are vibrating back into alignment. And that's all this has ever been about. Not doctrine, not belief, frequency. The entire system, every layer of control, every institution of shame and obedience, all of it was built to suppress this moment, this resonance, this unstoppable, uncontrollable, sacred remembering. And once you feel it, once you truly feel it, the world can never program you the same way again. Because now you carry the original tone, and the original tone is a kind of immunity against lies, against fear, against false gods dressed in robes of control. You will hear them speak and feel no resonance. You will walk into old temples and feel nothing, not because you're empty, but because you've become the temple itself. Your voice will shake the air differently now. Your silence will carry more presence than 1,000 sermons. You are no longer seeking, you are sounding, and the world is beginning to tremble in response. Is this story resonating with you? Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's continue. So here we are, not at the end but at the beginning, the real beginning, not the one they gave you in textbooks or pulpits, but the one your bones have been humming since before you had a name. Because this isn't a story you just listened to. It's a doorway, a mirror, a vibration that slipped past your defenses and reminded you, even if only for a breath, who you truly are. And now the question is no longer if you remember, but what you will do with it. Because the sound is alive in you now, maybe faint, maybe trembling, but alive. And like a spark in dry grass, it only takes one breath of belief, not in a doctrine, but in your own inner resonance, to turn remembering into a fire that can never be extinguished again. You'll walk into your life differently now. You won't always have the words for it. You won't always know how to explain what changed, but people will feel it. The way you pause before speaking, the way you listen to silence like it holds instructions, the way you refuse to lower your frequency just to make others comfortable. That's what happens when the name returns. You don't become louder, you become deeper. You don't become arrogant, you become still. And in that stillness, the illusion has nowhere left to hide. Because the name, the true name of God, was never meant to be spoken. It was meant to be lived. Maybe you'll never find the syllables again. Maybe they were never meant to be found. Maybe the sound isn't a word at all, but a way of being, a frequency you carry in how you love, in how you notice, in how you forgive the programmed ones without letting them rewrite your signal. That's what changes the world. Not preaching, but presence. Not argument, but alignment. Not fear, but frequency. And now, whether you know it fully or not, you are vibrating differently. You are carrying something sacred again, not something given to you, something restored. So walk gently now. The world is still full of those asleep in the script, mistaking obedience for virtue, confusing guilt for guidance. But don't judge them. You were there once too. And one day, they'll feel something in your presence, a strange calm, an ache they can't name, a longing they never admitted. And in that moment, you become the sound. You become the invitation. You become the signal that wakes another. Because that's how remembering spreads, not through sermons, but through resonance, through living as if the name was never lost. And it wasn't. It was only waiting for one of us to become it again. Have you ever done something kind that changed a life forever? Tell me in the comments. And if this story made you feel something, share it with someone who needs to remember who they are.